Contrast Security enables organizations to secure their applications from development to production. By embedding security sensors within software, Contrast automatically and continuously detects vulnerabilities in both custom and open source code while developers write code, providing them with context-specific how-to-fix guidance for easy and fast remediation. At the same time, by identifying only true vulnerabilities that pose risk and eliminating those that do not, Contrast empowers developers and security teams to prioritize and focus on only those vulnerabilities that matter. Learn how Contrast can help you secure your applications from development through production at securityweekly.com/contrast.
Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked about investing in open source and security, from funding projects to having empathy for project participants. This is the news segment where we put the AppSec perspective on programming, and I find all kinds of ways to put alliteration into these intros. I am your unalliterative host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. And I also have two announcements. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds, including ours, hopefully, and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, have a fun time on our Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Then you can also join us January 20th to learn how to build your own security lab at home. Then join us February 16th to learn about validation techniques within applications. Finally, join us March 2nd to learn 5 things you can do to catch more bad guys. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. John, now we get to chat for another half hour. This is a good way to spend a Tuesday, I admit. However, I spent all of 2021 pretty much successfully avoiding having to bring in a particular topic that you had to go in and find a whole bunch of articles on. And admittedly, I found one on too. So, deep breath. It's time to wade into Web3 and crypto, because there is just a few AppSec-related kinds of things going on in there. Oh, God. But yeah, exactly. I'm going to need some more time to prep, so you got to start us off on this one. Why are you doing this to me?
To all our listeners who are about to lose, I'm sorry. I mean that sincerely. But I'm probably going to be covering this one a lot this year because it's of interest to me. And by that, this is hopefully I won't do this intro again, but the security of blockchain applications and crypto coins in general has been growing on my radar for the last 2 or 3 months. We've had a few articles in the notes which we haven't got around to talking about because my illustrious co-host has been sort of, quieting them down. I know you're not, but I'm just joking. And we're hitting the point now where they're starting to break through. And like I said, it's there's going to be some things in the organizations you're going to hear me talk about less in 2022, and some things you hear me talk about more. And the security of this stuff is going to be one of them. I don't know if I'm going to use the phrase Web3 ongoing. I tend to fall in the camp of I think Web3 by itself is a bit of a farce which was created by the VCs. There's good uses for crypto out there. This stuff has been around for 10 plus years now. So because of that, and because of the length of time it's been around, I sense now that there should be more. A lot of us are sensing there should be more security, AppSec, and controls in it than what's in it. So it's becoming an interesting space for us from the point of view that you have something which is wildly, massively popular to certain groups of people out there. They're claiming that it's going to save the world, but still what we're seeing in most cases is that there's very little attention being paid to the AppSec side of things, or maybe not as much as it should be for a financial instrument, right? If this was a bank, and I can say that because I've been employed by banks in the past to do their AppSec, and and I know you're looking at this day in, day out, Mike. FinTech usually cares a ton about security. So we've got a few articles here. Let's dig in. The first is a tweet storm, or a tweet thread, and it's actually a really interesting one. I meant to spend a little more time digging into the details behind this, but I haven't yet. But let's see, I'm going to give myself, let's say 90 seconds, start the timer. There's this thing called Year, which is a token. So this is off the Ethereum. We're going to talk about today in this particular story. The Ethereum coin is a blockchain which has the ability to have subchains. So either an application might not usually, well, how far do we want to go? We don't want to go that far. So happy to talk about these things in more detail as people want in Discord. How about that? Year was created, $Year was created towards the end of 2021 with the idea that it was supposed to be, hey, look at, get a history of your transactions over the last year, right? ASW, we've done recap issues. Everyone wants to know what they did in the past. Strava does it. Everyone, any way, shape, or form, if you're doing something, how did you do over the last year? So this particular token looked like that's what it would do. It would show you so with Ethereum, you're able to have what are called smart contracts, which can do some amount of compute on top of just the coin itself. And this was one of those sort of things which it could look at your wallet and show you what happened over the last year. So people went ahead and this was published out there. People said, hey, you need to make the code public so we can have some faith in it. The people behind it said, sure, no problem. They published the code. People reviewed it. It looked okay. It looked a little sort of sketchy, but okay. And people started trading it and using it and looking and seeing what was going on. And after, I think, a day or so of this, maybe not even a day, the person changed the ownership on the token to being owned by one of the damn it, I'm going to get my phrases wrong here. They mean a lot, so apologies, people. I'll be better next time. But they changed the ownership to one of the exchanges. So if you actually tried to sell it, you couldn't sell it. So what that means is, so the person still had access to it. They had access to the tokens in it, but you couldn't actually, as an individual, if you had bought that token, you couldn't sell it. And what this did now is people in this particular space, since it's so sort of, I'm going over 90 seconds, ain't I? Since it's so sort of crazy, what happens is there's people that just watch some of the overall graphs on dashboards of like what crypto token is really popular, say what's going up, let me just buy that and I'll buy the rise and then I'll sell it, right? So sort of day trader, so to speak. So people saw that this thing was going up and up and up. And the reason it was going up and up and up is because people were buying it, but they couldn't sell it. So demand was increasing, and usually in most equity type things, if demand increases and you can't sell, the price goes up. So people saw the price going up. They had good old fear of missing out. They wanted to get in on that, so they started buying. And then they realized they were also on the road to Mattel and they couldn't sell. So this went on for an hour or two, and then the person came in and decided that that was a good point in time to take the money out of that account and disappear off into the ether. And I think he made about $1 million off that little game. And the reason this was being brought up here is the reason this happened in the first place is, and it's in this Twitter thread that's in our show notes. You have to really know your stuff to understand what's going on. But basically, he had a line of code in there. I don't know if it's he. They had a line of code in there that looks like it might be, maybe not good code practice, but it's just there. But what that actually did was that was allowing him to do this whole thing so that when someone would try to do a sale, it would end up doing this reversing and sending the money off, or sending the token off in a different direction. So long story short, back to our previous segment talking about everyone looking at something and missing code reviews, here's a perfect example of that. And I know we've got a few more articles covered on this, but you're going to hear us talk more about, or me talk more about, how you do static analysis and these type of things. How do you do code review? What does application security mean? What should they be doing? And, as usual, we take feedback. So if you want me to stop talking about this stuff, please go ahead and just let us know in Discord or on Twitter. John, stop talking about that crazy stuff. Or, hey, we want to hear more about it. Well, we're here for you, but I'll stop talking at that point, Mike.
Hold on, still typing in Discord, giving you some feedback. No, you make some good points here. That we ended up on 2021. Our final interview of the year was with Dan Guido from Trail of Bits, and Trail of Bits, and he and his engineers do a lot of code review on Solidity and in this crypto space. Now, unfortunately, we just didn't have time to get into that aspect of it. But this is a great chance to bring Dan back to talk about the crypto space. And one of his points that I had talked with him off show is that there is money involved here, and so and people are being scammed either unfairly, or I guess you can't really be scammed fairly, but in the sense where I was going with that is that sure, you can read code, but not everybody's a code expert. And even as you're pointing out in this thread, there are sophisticated engineers who are looking at this software saying, this looks a bit off, but it still passes the smell test. But whoops, this is how this particular smart contract or the particular code artifact can be weaponized for evil. And and in this case, it's a very, there's the common joke is that all of crypto is a built-in, it's a self-funding bug bounty platform because there is so much money at stake. So there are those interesting aspects to it. I will say too, for me, I did throw in an asterisk on the Web3 in the show note title, just to say that's kind of an ill-defined term, but we will talk about these aspects when they have really interesting or good AppSec angles to them. Another AppSec angle. Well, before we get to another AppSec angle, let's talk about your other one, just about you had Moxie's first impressions of Web3. And I'll just lead into it very quickly with, some of the things that I see about crypto or blockchain is that we have, Merkle trees are sort of a very elegant, but kind of uninteresting and I'll say mundane aspect because we've been using them in Git forever and ever. So there are components of this that I will very quickly acknowledge are interesting engineering. There's a lot of other interesting engineering that we may tease out back and forth, John, throughout the years we cover these. But there were some first impressions of this, and I also read this article and want to hear your thoughts on it.
My thoughts are the article is really awesome, but sort of yes. Going back really briefly before I dig into that deeper, and part of the reason that I'm talking about crypto, I'll use that phrase, is one of the things I really want to do, and we want to do more with our listeners in 2022, is how can we bring you all into this? How can we give you projects or something that you can look at and sort of get a sense for, if if people are interested in crypto and they want to go down that path. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what does a secure application look like. Let's look at what's out there and try to figure out, both the psychology reasons why, or just the normal developer reasons. Why aren't we doing a better job at that? Why aren't they doing a better job at this? I don't write this stuff. But so that's part of the drive behind this. It's not just to cover the big flashy thing. I think it's an interesting chance for some of you guys to do hands-on and take a look at things. Moxie is awesome. We know that. We've talked about his stuff so many times. This is when I read this, man, it just so many points of this resonated with me. It's a little longer than I expected at first, but it's not long. It's a coffee read, right? But it's the stuff he covers in there, sort of how he talks through this makes so much sense. At least, and maybe I'm of a similar generation as him, so maybe it's us old, grizzled neckbeard types, cleanly shaven, but there's neckbeard in here somewhere. Some of the points, let's just really quickly, some of where he starts with talking about, we went from centralized computing to decentralized, going back to centralized again. And now, one of the big things about whatever these coins you think about, it is DeFi, it's decentralized finance, right? That's the core behind what it's doing. But once you decide to go down that model, can you really do it and be successful and be popular in a decentralized manner? And he uses some examples like, think about how do you share video on IRC versus how do you share video. IRC is like, a very centralized model, very decentralized model, because you can have an IRC server anywhere, versus how do you share video on Slack or Discord because you're on a Discord server. And these are sort of examples, his point being, once you decentralize, it becomes much more difficult to keep things updated, either protocols or features or technology. And if a bug is found, to bring it from a security point of view, how you patch that bug, how you deal with that bug becomes way more different versus if everyone's coming to my Lambda function on Amazon and I just have to go and update the code and push it back out again. So that's just a tease of some of the things he talks about in there. But I don't know, I think it's probably, I haven't been reading a ton on this type of stuff, let's be very honest, but it's one of the most resonant articles that I've seen in the last few months in this space. So I think it's definitely worth the read for folks.
Worth a read, and it's a callback to some of the things we've mentioned even just last year about people don't want to run their own servers. Well, there's no real reason someone should be running their own email server, even possibly organizations running their own DNS. These are things to outsource their simple protocols, perhaps, but they're complex configurations, and they're also just commodities at this point. You don't need to be outsource that to the experts for your servers, and this is where it'll be interesting as we have these continued conversations, highlighting what are technology solutions, either in search of a problem, versus what are social solutions that are trying to bring in a technical solution to it, or social problems. So that's what's kind of interesting about this space. One of the reasons I will admit, pulled in an article about the crypto area was a cryptographer, pretty well-known cryptographer. This was Matthew Green, if I'm remembering my names correctly, was just doing a quick, as you mentioned, kind of a coffee break read through a code review. And this was interesting, not so much about what they were finding within the code review. There wasn't anything that was breaking down. There wasn't anything earth-shattering. But I wanted to highlight from the sense of read it from a perspective of how do you make your own code more effective or more conducive to code reviews. And here the researcher, here Matthew Green, I say researcher, he's a professor, a professional cryptographer, was pointing out things that would be helpful. Things like if you were implementing a standard, reference the standard or reference where you are implementing it, or having documentation within the code that talks to particular key points of workflows. This came from this step. This should be going to this other step. Things that help a reader understand the code. And so I think that helps get into another huge potential topic of what does it mean to document the code? And obviously the pathological case is you don't have to document int I, this is an integer, this will track blah. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is documentation that helps someone else read code, because you and I, John, everyone, I think, spends like orders of magnitude more time reading code than they do actually writing it. So that was kind of the bridge I wanted to bring here between crypto world, doing code reviews, because as you were pointing out in the very first Twitter thread that you highlighted, code reviewers can still be fallible. There's a lot of nuances, interesting things there. So we want to both have better tools to be able to find that, do some analysis, but also just better readability so that smart, informed reviewers can find these vulns more easily.
Yeah. Making your code readable. Frequently when I'm doing a code review on someone on a pull request, my comments are around maybe not syntax or things like that, but and I've had management scream at me in the past, you're slowing people down too much, but I want that code readable. I always talk about 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Back on this article really quickly, as you were mentioning there, as you were talking through it, I was rereading this, and he has one of his top things as a quick explainer. And I seem to be doing a lot of sort of the explaining myself today, but again, part of what we're doing here with crypto, what I'm going to be doing is probably trying to bring in some of these explainer type articles like this. And this is a good article. I mean, there's good, so a lot of strong opinions in here, but he's got good reasons for them. And obviously he's experienced in the space. But I think this is such a different world for those of us who aren't familiar with it, that I'm probably going to try and bring in a few explainer things here and there as part of talking about something else. So not just explaining crypto for the sake of it, but as we talk through, that Twitter thread I mentioned, you have to really know what's going on in that code. So in the future, hopefully we'll have some articles to talk a little more about what is going on here, why is this working this way, and why is crypto needed, why does it need to be like this? It's a pretty complex area to me right now. It's very academic. And unfortunately, with a lot of, sort of tech, which is academic like that, maybe it's overcomplicated, or maybe, we talk about here on if something is complicated, it's probably insecure, or it's going to be harder to secure. How about I put it that way? Yeah. Let's try and be positive. But so we'll probably have a few more things like this sort of talking about that from that point of view.
We absolutely will. And I know check out the GitHub repos of Trail of Bits as well as NCC Group, because I know they have a lot of public reports as well as tools and documentation around the types of reviews they've done for this. So I've been tracking and following this space as well, and we'll bring in a lot of those. But we're now, since this segment is brought to you by the letter C, C also stands for cloud. So we need to go to another one of your favorite cloud, and we'll also sneak in some CI/CD, since that starts with C as well, John. I had two quick articles we'll just skip over about an SSRF in Google Cloud. Nice write-up, highlighting it mostly because it's a really basic walkthrough of a potentially complex situation, but really nice step-by-step of here's how the researcher approached and identified a vulnerability, figured out some bypasses, and played around with some URL parsing confusion, which is another article I threw in there, just because that was on the following from the cache poisoning, our other letter C from last episode, and how parsing brought in a lot of vulnerabilities. But also, I'll skip over those because I want to get into two other clouds that you had, or at least AWS Glue and CloudFormation, as well as some CI/CD article that I'd also seen. So walk us through some of your non-Azure this week topics.
Man, there is so much stuff going on. I as I was opening up all these articles, I'm like, we're not getting through all this. But let's sort of hit fast forward. Orca, they released two papers at the same time, both related to Amazon. They found some really interesting vulnerabilities over there, and they reached out to the Amazon folks. My understanding is around the same time as Wiz reached out to Microsoft about some of the Azure issues last year, so this October-ish. But for some reason, I want to double check this. I'm going to say it, but please, people, don't take it as faith. I believe Wiz went ahead and published their stuff at the time they notified, which doesn't make any sense as I say it. So they must have found it earlier. But let me keep going, and just please disregard that, and I'll double check my facts. Orca found two things on Amazon. One in CloudFormation, their core automation IAC, which they provide. And basically, long story short, there was a way with CloudFormation, I believe this was, yes, it's an XML external entity vulnerability, which allowed people to write a CloudFormation script, which was allowing access to the underlying AWS infrastructure. If that caught your attention, that's good, because this is what we call really bad. Long story short, there was an XML parsing issue or an XML security issue within Amazon that allowed people. They didn't poke it completely, so it's not completely confirmed, but it looked like they had the ability to access, what's the word I'm looking for, anything within Amazon. So good article on this, yeah. I'm going fast, is why I'm not going over the details of it. And then the second one is an issue in Amazon AWS Glue, which is a I overloaded myself there for a second because there's so many Amazon things out there. But AWS Glue is an offering they have to allow you to do basically data migration and manipulation. So your data can be used coming from different sources and go to different sources. I think in the old day we'd call it an ETL in a way. But there was a issue found within Glue which would allow a privilege escalation, which again would allow access to. It was an IAM related issue which allowed them to escalate their privileges within Amazon and get access to other Amazon services, which they I believe actually for other customers. So again, these two are related in that they were both had that word other customer in them. Yes. They've both been patched by Amazon, so these are good reads. I'm not trying to make them sound less than what we've seen with other cloud providers. They're both bad things. Thank God they were found and caught. I think they were nitty gritty enough that they probably weren't too well known, if known at all. And it'll go on to another NCC article. This is a fun one. 10 real-world stories on how we've compromised CI/CD pipelines. And this is from, NCC just doesn't just do research. They've also got an awesome pen test team over there and stuff like that. So, there's some fun things like from attack number one. It always starts with an S3 bucket, ... I think people know where that goes. Privilege escalations in hardened environments, or what we think are hardened environments. Somewhere in here, they mention my old nemesis, Docker and Docker. People, if you do nothing else today, if you're running Docker and Docker, stop. So there's better ways to be doing that. There always was. Docker and Docker is great. Jerome did an awesome job creating it, but you shouldn't be using it in production. GitLab runners, some good stuff around there. But, it's a list of 10 things of I think what we've seen, and especially since we think about supply chain over the last few months or, last 6 or 8 months, the security of the supply chain we've talked about is underappreciated, and this is sort of a good list of things to think about and sort of spend your day, hopefully not fixing all of them, but making sure you're not exposed to them.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can really add to that is kind of rephrasing what you said at the end there, is that the CI/CD, this is our attack surfaces are kind of shifting around a bit now. So we're hardening developer endpoints, and we're hardening the repos themselves, so we could have signed commits, we can have multiple reviewers before we merge to main branches, things like that. But you still have to build the code, and that is where that's where attackers may shift their attention, because in order to build the code, all of these CI/CD tooling needs access to it. And there's in very beginning of the article, they talk about these are execution engines, meaning all these CI/CD tools execute code. And you also need some provenance, you need some least privilege, hopefully, within that code execution. So great things to highlight. I'd thrown in 2 other articles that I'll just set aside for reading later on for our listeners. One was another article from NCC Group. They did their own year-in review of research they had published and a lot of work that they had done. Listeners might be interested in particular the security tools, learning from their publicly reported security audits. Just learn how other people talk about and present and communicate security issues. We covered 1 or 2 of those, I think, on WhatsApp, for example. And there's also, of course, always going to be reducing vulnerabilities at scale. And as a callback to our prior segment, improving open source security, going on beyond just tools, although I think they were a lot of focused on that, but we were also focused on we need funding and people. And one other highlight is just that the Enigma 2022 conference is coming up. Just want to throw that on everybody's radar. So if it's a type of thing you follow, check out the conference. Follow it virtually or in person if you're able to. They have some pretty good COVID protocols in place. And it's the type of conference that we will be, after the fact, reviewing at least 1 or 2, I imagine, of the presentations. So that's some of the quick spin through the last of the articles I wanted to get through. Any parting notes, Mr. Kinsella?
I appreciate everyone for putting up with this week. There's a ton of stuff we're covering here. It's all in the show notes. It's hopefully something for everybody. How about that?
Hopefully something for everybody. Exactly. And thank you very much, John, for some great conversations in both our segments. Thanks, everyone, for chiming in on Discord, chatting with us. And thanks all to our listeners. Please remember to subscribe to the show, check out the show notes. And since this was brought to you by the letter C, go listen to some synthwave, in particular, Carpenter Brute. With that, we'll see you next week on Application Security Weekly.